least record and then we can share. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so it's about 7:40, so we want to go ahead and we'll get started. We know that people will continue to join. We have couple more panel members that may be joining us this evening. My name is Reverend Shelia Dent, and I am co-host, co-facilitator this evening with Reverend Tonia C. Nixon. We are doing this on behalf of our preaching professor, the Reverend Dr. James Harris, the distinguished professor. And then I'm not going to go through all of that because he's just looking at me like, okay, Dent, just get to the chase. It's like, what did I teach you in preaching?
Get to the point.
So tonight we're engaging a new generation of church leaders in the conversation about Black suffering, Black consciousness, and awakened self. We've got this great panel here tonight, and they are bringing diverse perspectives from the Black church and the church universal. So Tonia and I are going to co-facilitate the panel. But the way this will run is we'll have Dr. Harris do a welcome to the panel members as well. We'll do a reading from the Black suffering, Black consciousness and awakened self, Black consciousness, Black suffering, silent pain, and hidden hope, which Dr. Harris will do. And then Tony and I will introduce our panelists. Panel members will share their perspectives to 3 questions that we have, about 3 to 5 minutes each, and we'll give them their questions, and then we will also have participation from the audience as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Harris.
Okay, Sheila and Tonia, thank you so much. Listen, I wasn't sure whether you wanted me to do the reading or whether one of you all was going to do the reading from, I think you said the Du Bois chapter on consciousness. So I'm satisfied either way, since you know exactly what you wanted to read. I'll just get Sheila, you can read if you want to, or you can just give me the exact page number and I'll read either way. But when if you tell me the exact area or page numbers that you wanted to read, I know it's from chapter 4, I guess. And or some other area that you all were interested in hearing.
I would ask if you'd start on page 55 at the beginning and maybe go over to 57.
All right, I'll do that. All right, and I want to thank Sheila and Tonia as well as everybody who's on the call, and appreciate your participation and your sharing with us today, and just welcome all of you and thank you and encourage you to encourage your friends to get the book and to read the book as we continue to talk about it and try to get the book in the hands of Black people across the nation, churches, professionals, anybody else who likes to read. This chapter is chapter 4 in the book, Black Suffering. It is the title W.E.B. Du Bois and Black Consciousness and Awakened Self. And I read the epigram first. The brutality with which Negroes are treated in this country simply cannot be overstated. For the horrors of the American Negro's life, there has been almost no language. This is from James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time. In The Souls of Black Folk, Du Bois provides a survey of the context and mentality of Black people in America during the mid and latter parts of the 19th century, beginning in 1861, as legal slavery is about to be confronted by the Civil War. The work reveals the apparent societal issues and racial ills that linger and spill over from the antebellum period through Reconstruction and into the Jim Crow era. Du Bois gives voice to the countless dark bodies that have experienced evil, inhumane, and oppressive treatment. He delineates and interprets the self-consciousness of the African American in classic dialectical language. It is a two-pronged self-consciousness, which America imposes with denigrating interest on the Black other, who is hidden behind the veil. Du Bois explains with these searing and vivid words, and I quote, "The Negro is the sort of seventh son born with a veil and gifted with second sight in this American world, a world which yields him no true self consciousness, but only lets him see himself through the revelation of the other world. It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dog body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. The history of the American Negro is the history of strife, this longing to attain self-consciousness, to attain self-conscious manhood, to merge his double self into a better and true self, end quote. Self-consciousness is the acknowledgement and awareness of self in relation to the self and others. It is an aspect of humanness that helps to shape identity, perception, and truth about the self. The irony of the Negro self-consciousness, as Du Bois describes it, is this self-consciousness does not have the Black self providing its determination. Instead, it has an other who audaciously pretends and portends it knows the Black self. This perception, which is one of infuriating and ignorance, is forced upon the Negro, while the true self-consciousness is suppressed. Like chattel slavery, this projected consciousness is a form of enslavement that leaves the Negro longing for freedom, freedom to be human. No matter its true hue, the human soul desires expression as evidence of having meaning and purpose. The African American, at that point in history in which Du Bois writes, has been used as a revenue generating asset for the slave master with no other major purpose, like a farm machine or an animal, like a plow, a horse, or a mule, a commodity. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. And this is where we will begin this evening. And I'd like to thank our panel members for joining us this evening. We've got this phenomenal panel. I had trouble editing the bios because this new generation of church leaders is having a tremendous impact on how we move forward into this new context of the church. And so I'm going to try to do justice by these bios. So forgive me, you all, if I don't quite hit everything you gave me. But you gave me some powerful stuff, and I want to make sure that everybody recognizes the richness of this panel. So the first person we have is Mark Anthony Montgomery. Mark is okay, Mark, we do this, you know. He's a graduate of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology. And so we throw that right out there because he is an alum, as so are Tonia and I. But Mark is a native of Baltimore. He's currently serving as the pastor of student ministries at the Shiloh Baptist Church in Alexandria. He's also a graduate of Morehouse College, where he got his degree in he got a Bachelor's of Arts degree with honors in religious studies with a concentration in psychology and philosophy of religion. Mark is also a businessman. He started his first business when he was in high school, and it was a peer-to-peer mentoring company. And then while he was at Morehouse, he started his second business, Hearts with Promise. And as a result of that, when he graduated from Morehouse, he started working with the Baltimore City Public Schools, and he was able to get a contract with the city schools where he brought the Hearts with Promise to the school system to be able to be the external, I'll say agitator, for lack of a better description, in one of the elementary schools in Baltimore. He also was hired as the Minister of Social Action and creative director of the Nonviolence Peace Project at Bethel AME Church as a result of what transpired in Baltimore with the Freddie Gray incident. So, Mark, we welcome you and we thank you. And then we have Ramon Jackson. I've known Ray for a long time, and he's a wonderful young man. He is a spiritual entrepreneur with a passion for Jesus and people. He's a church planter, and he is a musician. He's the CEO of his own production company, Hypnotic Music Productions, in conjunction with Phase Recording and Media. But one of the great things that I love about Ray in his ministry is the well, which is something that Ray created to minister to those who are, we will call them the unchurched. He's not meeting in the building. He's meeting people where they are, and he's bringing God to them where they are. And that's just one of the things that Ray does. He's also a musician as well. He's also been a foster parent. And as a result, is probably one of the youngest grandparents you would meet, because he's got 9 grandchildren as a result of his fostering children. There's so much more to tell you about Ray, but I'm going to cut that right there because I want to give these people a chance to talk. And then we have Ana Yelsi Velasco Sanchez. She is an Indo-Latinx mujerista offering education, coaching, consulting, writing, and art, all intended to assist people in building an interlocking framework for justice. She is the founder of In Conjunto, a collective of people of color working independently at the intersection of justice and spirituality. She is also the co-creator of the Digital Dine-In Project, a virtual dining and learning experience bringing people together from around the world. Then we have Matt Collinson. Matt is the training and curriculum development manager for Just Leadership, a New York-based nonprofit working to end mass incarceration through advocacy, empowerment, and training for people directly impacted by the criminal justice system. In addition, he serves as an adjunct professor in the Department of Justice and Criminology at American University, teaching classes on the pre-trial shadow justice system and the role of race relations in criminal justice. Matt holds a master's degree in public mental health from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. In addition, he also serves on the leadership team of The Well. And then we have Brennan, is it Booze? Brennan, did I lose
Just like
Booze? Okay, Brennan Booze, my buddy from Rochester, New York. Passionate about effectively telling and sharing authentic stories that connect people and inspire change. He is an award-winning digital media strategist that specializes in developing organic and paid content and media strategies. Brennan, though, what I love about him is he takes his gift in communications to help us deliver powerful content that will impact and change lives. And so he's not just a communications guy. He's somebody who is another one of these non-traditional church leaders who will bring us forward for bringing this conversation to the next generation, opening up the conversation about Black consciousness and awakened self. So I'm going to turn it over to Tonia now and let her take us through the next session. But thank you all for agreeing to join. Oh, whoa.
Did you miss someone?
Hold it.
Did you miss someone?
Shelia Dent. I missed the one that I love, 3J. 3J. Do you know why we call him 3J? 3J, Julian Jackson, mononymously known as 3J, which refers to Jesus, Justice, and Jehovah. I love it. I love it. And he is a rapper, songwriter, dancer, graphic designer, And he has produced 3 major music projects: an album named after his former duo, Alive Not Dead, his solo debut, The Unusual Project, and his newest and most recently released single, For Your Love, a collaboration with his longtime mentor and friend, Pastor Ray. And so 3J, please chalk it up to the head and not the heart, because he's very special to me, you all. 3J is, in my view, the next generation, and he's blazing the trail. And so we need to listen up for what he will share with us this evening as well. So now, Tonia, I'll turn it over to you.
Ooh, we have some pioneers as panelists today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so I'm going to jump right into the question to the panelists. Considering W.E.B. Du Bois's position of Black consciousness and an awakened self, how do you see the Black church and or the church universal?
Jump right in.
Just jump right in. I know it's deep. It has you pondering, right? What does that look like?
You might want to give them an order, just a list of names to go in order. You might want to do that. So
No, okay. Or let me know if you need some context. If you need more context, I'd be happy to do that as well. You need more context.
More context would help. Just a little bit more.
Just a little bit more. Okay. So weeks ago, Shelia and I had this conversation. I am a Generation Xer. I think Shelia is a boomer. And we had this conversation about the Black church and how the Black church used to serve as the backbone of the Black community, right? And so we talked about how there used to be free food that was given, we used to coin it the government cheese, we would get groceries of food. But that was the way the church addressed suffering to the Black community, right? But then we also talked about suffering on a larger scale, right? What is the Black church's role on a macro scale as it relates to Black suffering, poverty, some of the challenges that we experience? And then we're adding to that the church universal, because we do understand that there are those of us in different areas of the church, right? Maybe not necessarily targeting the Black church, but we're all in the kingdom of God. And so when Du Bois talks about the self, he's talking about a dualistic nature. He's talking about how we operate from 2 different perspectives, the perspective of who we are and the perspective of how others perceive us. As it relates to the Black church or the church universal, what is it, or how can the church address the macro and micro suffering of individual suffering or communal suffering? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. They jumping in now. Go ahead.
No, and I think yeah, just more. I appreciate the extended clarification. I think the first step, with anything would have to be acknowledgement of the position that we're in right now, and the acknowledgement of the perceived, and also the reality of the absence of that level of consciousness within the Black church. For me, it would probably be acknowledging as well that there is duality in all of us, we aren't. I think for too long, especially in church, we've given the vision of purpose as being the singular thing, or the singular position that you get into, and I think that more and more, I know myself and the people I've worked with, we're starting to realize that purpose is more of a journey than a singular position or something that we hold. And so in that, there has to be, an expansion of the vision of purpose of what we can do, of how we can impact our community, our church, our own personal lives. And I think even more so now, more in 2020 and 2021, there's been a real focus on, especially with, young Black spirituals on, listen, I got to take care of me, and making sure that we do the self-care to not burn ourselves out. And so I think, approaching it from those standpoints that I kind of laid out there would be kind of that first step for me.
For me, being critical of the church, of the Black church, and of Christianity in general, even just culture, this whole idea of being as what they call a millennial. I don't like to label myself a millennial, but in that age demographic, 2006, upon going to Morehouse, I had no friends who were conscious. They were not in what we will call the life of the mind. That we lacked, as Dr. Harris' book, we lacked an awareness really of who we are, our reality. We were living, but we really weren't familiar with the state of our being, the state of our living, what's going on around us. Upon going to Morehouse, I started reading, as he talks about in the book, that education led to awareness. For me, education was always one-sided. You walk in social studies class, all you see is white men. You learn about American history, it's all about white people. But going to Morehouse, education helped me to realize that there are theories like out of Africa theory, where I begin to see myself in the creation of the world and the universe, the spawning of history, and things begin to connect. I became aware. I started reading Know Thyself by Naeem Akbar, and I started understanding really the tension between African-American history and world history, how they've tried to start our history in the 1400s with slavery, never really telling us what we were, where we were prior to. So upon Morehouse reading, I entered in what you call the life of mind, this awareness, and reading W.E.B. Du Bois and the souls of Black folks, and understanding this double consciousness, and knowing that I'm a Black man, but I'm having an American experience, same way as believers, we're human having this spiritual experience. And so, as the brother said, recognizing the duality of life. There's physicality, then there's metaphysicality. And so just entering the life of mind. So that's 2006. And I would come home and talk to my friends about, the Black plight, Black struggle, talk about oppression. I was reading The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Frantz Fanon, White-Faced Black Skin. And I began to understand the duality and the true nature of being Black in America. And a lot of people weren't hearing it in 2005, 2006. 3 or 4 years later, after President Barack Obama becomes president, a young man is killed down in Florida. I can't think of his name right now, with the hoodie.
Trayvon Martin.
Trayvon Martin
is killed. And then people begin to talk about and see that what was happening in the 60s and 70s with Jim and Jane Crow is now being transformed into police brutality. And so people are like, okay, here we go. Social injustice is still happening. Oppression is real. Because if you asked us back in the late 90s, as teenagers and middle school kids, is racism real? Unless you had a head-on collision with white people, you wouldn't have known that racism and oppression was still going on, because we weren't aware of it. So becoming aware in the early 2000s, while reading and being enlightened, and then studying the history of the Black church and understanding that the Black church is born out of the tension of trying to find spiritual identity, but also a sense of human integrity. And so what happens is, I believe the Black church, I can't speak for the church at large because my context is the Black church. I was born in the Black church. I'm going to die in the Black church unless God expands the territory, like he did with Dr. King. I believe Dr. King's work expanded him beyond the Black church, beyond America, to the universe. But my context as a Black churchman, I believe it's our responsibility to stay within the tension of trying to understand who we are as a people in light of our context. And that level of consciousness speaks to our faith journey, also with our American journey. How do we kind of make that coincide, which at the bedrock of it is suffering. Our American experience for us as African Americans is rooted in oppression. It's rooted in slavery. It's rooted in the master and bondsman relationship that he uses in the text. And so as the Black church, we must be vigilant of that and understand not a lot has changed. Not a lot has changed. What Michael Eric Dyson calls the blue and black plague is very prevalent in how we say Black Lives Matter. That's a millennial moniker. That's a millennial saying, but we fail to connect that with our spiritual journey. There is a great push for consciousness in the millennial world. We don't go to church as much, but we have spiritual practices. We go to brunch. We don't go to Bible study, but they're all spiritual practices. So how do we as a church not push millennials away because of their different approach to spirituality, but how do we kind of synchronize it? I think we as Black people, we've divided ourselves over so much. Growing up Pentecostal, being working in the Methodist church, being ordained Baptist, understanding the complexities and the diversities within our faith experiences and expression, I believe we do more, we cause more suffering amongst ourselves. So as we struggle in the tension of identity of this double consciousness of being American, being Black, being physical and spiritual, we got to keep pushing forward that God has as brother said, God has a purpose for us, and this purpose is for us to be true to self. I'm sorry about that.
No problem. Thanks, Mark. And Ray, I want you to jump in because of what you're doing with the well. You and Ray 3J, you got to talk about that, because I think the way that you all are approaching things and the way that you're taking things out into the community, you are in fact provoking that conversation about consciousness and being awakened.
Yeah, thank you. I was listening to my brother.
He made
Reverend
my whole
Montgomery.
answer go to trash.
Listen,
Like,
it was so
I
prolific.
don't even know what to say no more.
So I
Like,
appreciate that answer.
oh man,
I think there has to be, like, I was listening to all the answers, and I mean, I am humbled to come after both Brennan and Mark, but I think that there is still a consciousness that is very awake in terms of the Black community. I don't know that the Black church still has as strong of a consciousness as what it once had. And so I think part of that is understanding the dynamics of the differences in culture within our own settings. Right? Like, I think part of us building the well was that we realized, right, there's even within the church of the Black church, there are still very much prejudices and very much discrimination, right? And so, right, like, there are certain churches where if you're not a good stock, or if you don't come from a certain background, right, like, you're not, they say the doors are open, but they're not really open, right? Like, because you don't fit into the mesh of what we want. There are other churches where, you're going to Holy Ghost feel, shout all day. But then if you come in there and you're a quiet praiser, you're not really wanted, right? Like, because there's something wrong with you if you don't know how to praise the way that we praise. And so there's already the system set up, even in the dynamics of our church. We say everybody's welcome, but they're not really welcome. And I think what we have to do is continue to push past those levels of segregation within our own context and open ourselves up so that we are open to really not saying that our doors are open to everyone, but living in the ideal of, no, everybody is welcome. And we have to move ourselves away from, we talk a lot about this on the well, but we have to be willing to move ourselves away from the more Anglo-Saxon hierarchy of church that has been set for us, right? Because there's this thing that we follow. Well, this is what we were taught by, this is how we tried to fit in. And so now, because we've tried to fit in so much to what the white church looks like, then we begin to struggle in our own ways. Like, we back away from the natural things of our own culture, right? The voluptuousness of and the beauty of our women, right? We don't want us to see that. We don't want to praise that the Black woman, right? Our natural hair, right? Like, there's so many places where having dreads, no, like, you have to be, like, you can't do that. I remember serving in a church as a musician, and I was told that I could not be the musician of that church if I did not take out my cornrows at the time. I had to, like, they didn't like the bush, but they preferred to have the bush than to have it locked or cornrowed or anything like that. And so all these false narratives of what we are to be in church. And unfortunately, right, because my last part of this is because racism has moved to this place where it is more on an invisible sort of spectrum, right? It's not as we don't see it like we did when there was the Jim Crow and when we were, you know, forced to sit in different places. Because we don't see it like that, we no longer feel this collective problem that I think in the civil rights movement was something we joined forces on. Didn't matter what church you were part of, we were going to join forces to fight because we knew we couldn't live like that. We couldn't live in that place. Now, racism is sort of swept under the rug. It's this invisible force. And so now we're all trying to fight different battles, and we don't think that we have a collective battle to fight. So we're all about being more separate than we are equal. And I think we've got to get past that. So I think the church consciousness is still there, but it's been separated, which defeats us in some ways, right? Like we're not joined together to march to one beat or one drum against the forces of evil. We're all attacking it from different places. There's tons of churches. You just got to pick one, and that's where you land. And you don't think anything about being a part of the same structure or the system or the church or the Christianity up the street. We're just all in it as separate people. And I think we got to do better at that. But I think that's where we stand as of now.
3J, you want to jump in there? You good?
I have nothing after those three great. I don't know what to say. I feel like all three of them taking anything that I could have said, but yeah, I have nothing. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
Like, thanks.
Hip hop culture, though, right? Like,
yeah. So you know, that's a good thing to top on. Because I am a part of the hip hop culture in the church, and from my experience, we're really not accepted within the church because people think that hip hop is street, hip hop is with thugs and gangsters. And so even with people in the church doing hip hop, we're looked at as, oh, well, you're still not one of us. Even though you're in the church, you're still not a part of us. And I think we have to come to an understanding where everything can be done in God's glory: rapping, singing, dancing, and what other type of gifts we have, miming, all of this type of stuff, all the things that the millennials are bringing out to show the people this is a new thing. We can also understand that we can still do these things by praising God, giving God praise and everything else. And we have to come to a point, for I feel that we need to come to an understanding of, number one, all of us are messed up. Number two, all of us can be wrong. We're not going to get it right. We all don't know everything. You know what I'm saying? There are going to be times that they're going to ask us questions and say, well, what do you think about this? Or what do you know about this? I don't know. And it's okay to admit we don't know because we're human. You know, we're going to make mistakes. We're learning this thing just like you. And instead of saying, oh, well, I have the answer to it, and you actually don't know, say, I don't know. Let's study together. You know, meeting a place where that person is. And I think that's where the church, especially the Black church now, we need to get back to, is meeting the people where they are. Y'all just don't come to our church. Come to our church and you'll get like us. No, let's go to y'all and find out where you are so we can help you get to where you need to be, instead of just making it all about, no, you're in our church, so you're going to do what we say. No, first of all, it's God's house. So whether it be in God's house, we're going to do what God says. So if he says, hey, bring the people together, teach them where they are and help them grow, that's what we do. It's not our stipulation, but that's just me.
Well, I just love that's just me.
That's just me.
Before I jump over to Matt and Anna Yelsey, I wanted to give Carissa an opportunity to speak because she put something in the chat. So Carissa.
Good morning. Well, it's not even morning, evening, everybody. I think there's this other piece, and when Mark was talking, it made me think about the church's cultural identity, and how as we have begun to integrate over time, there's this interesting overlap of how capitalism and its purposes have also infiltrated the church and the way we engage, how we exist in our communities and amongst one another. And so I think even using W.E.B. Du Bois is interesting in his concept of the talented tenth, right? That you need this upper echelon, if you will, or that there exists one and there is a segregation of classes through that. And the church has upheld that. And so when I think about how we have moved to address suffering, oftentimes through the generation of financial means or through further access, greater proximity to whiteness, all of these things that we don't talk about in terms of how they have caused us to treat each other in community and how we perpetuate suffering amongst one another and inflicting that on one another in the name of how we see healing and how we have appropriated whiteness, or the configurations and systems and institutions that are made of whiteness as our means of being able to generate healing. And I think there is something to be said about us getting to a place where we can articulate what the purpose of the Black church is for our community, for ourselves, without the infringement of white voices influencing that. And I don't think that we have gotten to that place because we see resources in direct proximity to whiteness. And so there is a posturing oftentimes that we take. And I'm a former United Methodist pastor. I surrendered credentials in 2017. But we got to make a choice about whether or not the liberation of our community and the ending of our suffering is the forefront of what the Black church is here to be able to culturally transmit and to be a safe space to produce, or if institutional preservation in our proximity to being able to have the same things as other communities is more important. Because what I believe is that when we look to each other, everything that we need is already existing in community, but we don't see the value in each other in those ways. So we don't approach each other in those ways, which 3J, when you was talking about how the hip hop culture is not embraced, well, now we're talking about elitism, right? Because pull your pants up when you come in here, take your hat off, make sure you don't sit in grandma's seat or whoever, you know what I'm saying? Like there are all these unspoken rules that folk who are coming for healing actually don't have no knowledge of, right? Because we have this insider-outsider culture. And so when I'm gonna digress, but again, I think we as a people got to get to a place where we are okay saying that we are going to radically imagine what church looks like for us that actually amplifies our liberation in ways that our people can experience a shift in their material reality. Like I'm cool with theology, but theology without praxis is we don't want to do that. So I just think we should be more intentional about how we own our power as Black people who acknowledge that we are here to curate space for healing within the Black community. And I'll stop there.
Thanks, Carissa. That was great. That was great. Now I want to get Anna Yeltsin and Matt, because they too bring this perspective on suffering, and from the Church Universal and the initiatives that they are involved in also evoke consciousness and awareness. And so I want to hear from you all as well.
Thank you. There's so much that folks were saying, particularly Carissa and Mark, that I'm like, yes. But Matt nudged me as folks were talking. We're like, you got to speak from coming as a mujerista. But mujerista, to be Latina and be Christian and a theology that springs from that experience. The things that I'm thinking of, first of all, is yes, there's church, there's the universal church, but then there's also church small c, and then there's just what it is to create holy places and holy postures outside of like the language of church. And so much of my experience and my relationships, particularly now, are for folks who I would say are doing church and are doing it really well and don't use that language and aren't necessarily concerned with like these high church conversations, but I think we have so much to learn from. And the reason the mujerista concept is like, there's this idea of la lucha, the constant struggle that we have, and just the day-to-day struggle of being Latina, of being a person of color, of being Black. And excuse me, the things that I've seen where church is done best. I'm getting a tickle in my throat. You talk.
I can't follow that. Yeah, I think to sort of carry on with that conversation, like this idea of liberation is really important. And I think, Carissa, I think you made this point that like, do we want to be about liberation, or do we want to be about sort of preserving our own existence? And I think Ray, when you were talking about the civil rights movement, I was thinking of like the small number of white churches that were willing to get involved and were willing to take the lead from the Black church. And you sort of see today, there's the same kind of like, there's a few small white churches that are down with Black Lives Matter, but most of them are not involved at all. And if they do want to get involved, one of the things that I've seen from my white church friends on social media is, we had the protest in Lafayette Square where Trump tear gassed all the protesters. And then 4 days later, all the white church folks showed up to take pictures for their Instagram, to be in that same space, but to be absolutely removed from this concept of liberation. So I think there's something in the sort of the white church consciousness of like, we don't want to get too close to this idea of liberation. I think because it impacts our power and access to resources. And so I think there's something really concerning about this sort of veneer of caring. And I'll let you go back to where you were.
Sorry about that. That was like the worst timing for my point. No, the point I was trying to say is there's so many folks that I see living out what I think it is to be Christian, to be the church and to do it well, that aren't using necessarily that language. And so I think I have my time split between a lot of activist, organizing, justice spaces and a lot of church spaces. And it's so interesting to hear different perspectives on the same situation and how things are read, because the direct action and the mutual aid work and the community care work that I see being done by folks that aren't, that either are Christian, post-Christian, Christian adjacent, like there's this myriad of how they understand it. But they're doing all of this incredible work, and we are still continuing this legacy of caring for our neighbor, caring for our communities, and standing in that gap when there's this absence of like having our needs met by greater society. I see us doing that, I would argue, just as well as we always have been, and sometimes in more creative new ways. It's just not necessarily done in the formal ways that might have been expected by past generations. So I want to honor the folks who are doing that work day in and day out, and people are surviving because of them. And then I think, and Mark kind of touched on this, and Carissa did a little bit too, there's this, when you have deconstruction of your faith, when you're going through a process of decolonizing your faith and coming to terms with it being a religion that has been like in the death grip of enslavers and colonizers for it's the majority of existence. You're going to understand church different. You're going to understand your consciousness is going to shift and change, and your understanding of service to one another is going to shift and change. And the language you're comfortable applying to it is going to shift and change, because our relationship to religion and spirituality is shifting as we start to like better understand, and Mark touched on this, better understand our history and like how things really went down. Of course, we're going to approach things differently.
Awesome, powerful. Tonia?
I'm speechless, and that never happens. It never happens. My God. So let me just cover some of the notes I wrote down, because of course I'm a student, right? What we've gotten so far from the panelists is, one, acknowledging the duality that exists with the Black church, being critical of the Black church and the Church Universal, becoming more aware, studying the history of the Black church, and staying within the tension in light of our context. The consciousness in the community is awake. The Black church, not necessarily, at least not what it once was. And then a couple of questions. Is everyone really welcome in the Black church? We say they're welcome. We open up the doors, but are they really welcome? The Black church is segregated when we should be meeting people where they are. And the church and capitalism. Thank you, Carissa, for this. The infiltration of capitalism in the Black church. What is the identity of the Black church? Is the Black church essentially going to abandon their identity or her identity in order for self-preservation, for the resources that are available through capitalism, through white churches and other white resources? And so this whole idea of radically imagining what the Black church could be would essentially require either we make a choice, either self-preservation or acceptance of the white resources. And then I will offer another choice. If there is something that we could do in the middle, and I don't know what that looks like, Carissa, I'm just throwing it out there. Because I think oftentimes we stifle ourselves when we draw a line in the sand and we force ourselves to choose. When we are making a choice of that magnitude, then we're going to create more division. So I just wonder, I'm throwing it out there, I don't know. This is a great discussion, right? I'm offering a third alternative, but hey, the panelists are power packed. You guys have exceeded my expectations. We are at 8:25 now, so I would offer we open it up to participants. Open up the floor.
Reverend,
go ahead, Reverend.
Reverend, this concept of Black suffering for this generation, for the conscious Black person in 2021 who's a believer, we have to synergize our what some would call our social consciousness with our sacred consciousness. And for generations before, they're separated, but for us, they're kind of one. And I guess that's our Africanness. It's not sacred and secular or social, they're one. And so if you heard the tenor of everyone's conversation, it's really trying to get to what I mentioned before, this identity, how we see ourselves in context of our faith and our reality. Sister said, Sister Carissa said, to do theology without practicality maintains the level of abuse that we've given to our church members and how we have kind of profited and pimped our community. I'm a proponent of healthy theology and reading the scripture for what it says and interpreting it to the point where you can do something, where it's practical. And we got to kind of reclaim the truth of Jesus Christ and how he died for salvation. He died for the freedom of the oppressed. There's no way around the Bible dealing with salvation. Salvation, deliverance is a supernatural word for freedom. We got to kind of reclaim how we preach Jesus and how we see Jesus, even down to the color of Jesus, the color of God, how we see. If you can't see yourself in God in the Imagine Deo, how can you ever be a child of God? I think we've done a disservice to the church preaching unhealthy and unstable and unsystematic theology. I believe the Bible is very can provide practical lenses and approaches to life, not to Christianity, but to life. For the millennial, it's not about being a Christian. It's about walking how Christ walked. It's about embodying the Spirit of God. And I think when we do that, addressing suffering is a given. Me speaking to somebody on the street who's different is addressing, it's recognizing humanity. Like, forget feeding multitudes of people at this point. Let's recognize people's humanity. I have a philosophy that if you meet a need, God will touch a heart. When God touches the heart, God will save a soul. Many will question whether or not the church today is doing the same service that the Black church did in the 60s and 70s, where they were meeting the need, where they were the home of social life. They were the place where we had belonging. As Dr. Hirsch said, it's the only thing that we own, and probably the only thing that we own as masters. But we may not be serving the same way in the church. But statistics say millennials give to social initiatives more than they give offering and tithes in the church. That should be alarming to us, because we as millennials, we care about addressing suffering in the world. Our conversation is about suffering in work environments, suffering in athletics. Our sister just got banned from the Olympics for smoking weed, and Michael Phelps still swam after he got busted. So for us, that social justice piece, that our Blackness isn't regulated to church. Our Blackness is regulated to life. And for us, it's not based off of our religious language and dogma. It's based off of our humanity. When do we get to the humanity of society and the humanity? I like to preach the humanity of Jesus. Jesus sat with the leper. He sat with Matthew. He sat with the tax collectors. You know what I mean? He went to Jairus' house. Like, so for me, we got to reclaim a sense of humanity in Jesus and how he touched the common person. And I speak of that because as Blacks, we got to get back to meeting the basic needs of our people. And once we get to that place and we can see ourselves, you can see your blackness in God, you can see your Hispanic nature in God, then we can address suffering. Because before we can meet somebody who's physically hungry, we got people out here socially dying because they don't see themselves in our faith.
And can I drop one more hint? I think just in all of it, I think the one thing we absolutely have to do is recognize that, I mean, the church history that we've been passed down and how we've assimilated into this, European expression of faith. And I'm not talking about the religion of Christianity, this expression that we go through our routines, our practices and things like that. I think we have to like name that, like, there's an assimilation culture within church, and it's built to assimilate, and that's oppressive, especially to people who are searching to find their individuality. Like assimilating and trying to find my individuality at the same time is hard. It's very difficult to do. I can't be myself and be you or who you want me to be at the same time. And I think that that's part of where, like, the struggle between church and young folks, church and Black people, church and honestly anyone that doesn't have an assimilative, like, just nature about them, there's gonna be tension there because of the, like, I mean, like what we said earlier, like, you come into church, you got to pull up your pants. Ladies, you have to dress a certain way so that all your curves don't show. And even in that, like, because of the assimilative culture, we don't address real problems. Like, we never address the fact that a woman can dress in whatever she wants. We never, like, we never look into the fact that it's the male or woman's view of that woman and what she's wearing that is the issue. It's not necessarily what she's wearing. It's my lens, it's my perspective and how I interpret that and how I internalize it, and then express it in whatever actions I take. Like, that's the real issue. And I think that, like, more than anything, like, we have to really peel back the layers to this onion and this facade that, that we built for ourselves, and that this is church, because it's not. And I think that, I mean, what Mark, what you said, it brought up a bar from Jay-Z that, like, where he mentioned, he said, like the kids, they wear, like, we got blue rags in the street, like, basically saying that, like, gangsters, we in the street because we looking for love. And, like, when I heard it, and it's on I can't remember the exact track, but it's on the Kingdom Come, I mean, not Kingdom Come, the album with Kanye. But he brought, like when I thought of that quote, like, if people are out here in the streets looking for love, and we're supposed to be the embodiment of Christ and the hands and feet of Christ, then what does that say about what we're doing? Clearly, we're doing something wrong.
Wow, powerful, powerful, powerful. I wish we could go on for hours. However, we have hit the 8:33 mark. Dr. Harris, I have to defer to you. I see Jay with Ray with something on the tip of his tongue, but I got to turn it back over to Dr. Harris. Dr. Harris, this was just explosive. This was absolutely explosive. And the only thing I'll add to this is we are seeing church reformation right in front of our eyes, and that's what's required to meet the need of this time. Dr. Harris, I turn it over to you.
Well, I want to say that you said Ray had something on his lips that you could perceive with your mental telepathy. And so I want to just allow him to speak. Speak, sir.
All right, bro. Dr. Harris, I appreciate that. I think I was, and I'll try to be brief. I know as pastors can say, we're going to be brief, and we really aren't brief, but I will try my best to be brief. I will quickly say, I think that it is, I think my brother said it, and Brendan really touched on it. It's really the humanity of ourselves. I think we've got to move past, and again, I don't want to give the church a bad rep, because the church, the people and the church, the institution, is not bad all the way around. There are some great things that are coming out of the church, the people, and church, the institution. What I will say is that sometimes I think that we have to move away from the image of the hierarchy of the institution, because we then miss the relevance of the people. The institution is made up of the people, right? And so there is this place, and I'm so honored to have my sister Anna Josie on and my brother Matt on tonight, because I think that when you go to a sports game, when you go to a music concert, when you go to a hip hop concert, when you go to a party, is when you see people at their best, right? There's this place of people coming together. They're rooting for the same thing, no matter how they look, where they're from, what their background, right? They're all rooting for the same thing. If we could bring ourselves to a place, right, where Jesus is that same thing, that right there is the message of love that needs to be incorporated in all of our churches, right? I think if we could just move to that place where we go, you know what are we all gathered for? We're all gathered for love. So we won't walk past a person suffering. We won't look at a person who is different from us and begin to judge too quickly, right? We won't begin, because I think it was Mark who said that earlier, but when we look at people and we see the image of God, that's where we really have to start teaching, right? God said, let us make mankind in our image. And so if we begin to see people is in God's image, then we wouldn't pass people, but we love people, right? No matter where they're from, what they look like. That's the place that the church has got to begin to teach universally in a very corporate way, to just say, listen, if you're going to do anything for Christ, then you've got to do it for the least, because there is the image of God. So when I look at the lowly, I see the image of God. When I look at the middle class, I see them. When I look at Republican and Democrat, I still see the image of God, despite our differences, despite the things we disagree with. I can't hate you. I can't do anything to harm you or against you, because despite our disagreements, you are still created in the image of God. So I just need to rest there and just make that a point that I had to shout out on. So
where's the Bible?
Wow, that's excellent. You all are this is a marvelous conversation. You all are so so powerful in terms of your analysis.
My God.
Let me just say, I've written about Black love as well, and your discussion about Black love is very, very critical and very, very important. I just want to say that in my view, that the embodiment of Black love, one of the ways to embody Black love today is to get vaccinated, to take the vaccine, because of it shows your love for the other. Okay, your love for the other, your love for the other Black person. So I say that to everybody, and I encourage that to everybody. But listen, Professor Shelia and Professor Tonia, they have been just extraordinary in putting this together. I mean, you all are just so good at this, and you have been so excellent, and you put together an excellent panel, and I'm just blown away, and I'm grateful. Let me just say that, you know, as a writer of books and as a Black writer, I I don't want to overstep my bounds, but I do want to encourage each of you to encourage a few other people to purchase the book and to to begin your own discussion groups or book discussion groups or discussion groups regarding Black suffering. You all have said some powerful things about Black suffering. It's often a tough book. It was a tough book for me to write. It's in many areas a tough book to read. But if anybody understands Black suffering, I think that that you all do, that Black people understand on every level. You don't have to have a PhD to understand Black suffering, because you encounter Black suffering every day when you wake up and when you walk out the door as a Black person. That's my own experience, and in many ways, that's your experience. And you all have been just absolutely extraordinary. Every time people read the book and talk about it, I learn something myself, you know, because my belief is that the reader is often as capable of understanding the text as much or better than the writer. Okay, so while I have written Black suffering, you all have read it and maybe have understood it in a way that was even beyond my ability in the writing itself. And I'm encouraged by that, and I'm very grateful by that. So we want to encourage those of you who feel, that the Black church has done you wrong in some way, let me just say I've been a pastor of a Black church for over 40 years. And I understand because the Black church has done me wrong too. I mean, so in other words,
Honest, that's
the,
honest.
yeah, the Black church is grounded in imperfections, okay, and so forth, and you all have been right on it because whoever said, how you can come into the church and don't feel welcome and that kind of thing, and I've done evangelistic campaigns and other kinds of things all the time, but you're absolutely on it. I mean, there are people in the church who don't want to see poor people sitting on their pews. They don't want to see people who don't necessarily smell like them to be sitting in certain proximity to them. And so now, the good thing maybe about the pandemic is that, you don't have to sit that close to anybody anymore. You can maintain social distancing and all of that. And so folk, you don't, I think some of the issues that the Black church has been concerned about are no longer issues in this age of pandemic and the age of where we find ourselves. But listen, my former student, Mark, you were really on target. I hope that, you were able to negotiate my class pretty successfully. And, and to others, Brennan and Pastor Ray, CJ or M3, I'm getting your name wrong.
3J.
3J. Y'all have been awesome, just absolutely awesome. And I have been blessed.
And don't forget Anna Yelsey and Matt.
Anna and Matt, yes. Anna and Matt.
And Carissa Rogers.
Yes, I want to thank all of you. I see. I'm only looking at the faces that are in front of me, but Sheila and Tonia are responsible for getting all of you to participate. We're so grateful and so thankful. I just want to encourage each of you. I had asked or had hoped that Tonia and Sheila would do it.
Oh, well, we have, wait, because I don't want to get a B or a C in your class again. No one likes to retake the class. So I want to encourage everyone, if you have not done so, to purchase the book, Black Suffering, Silent Pain, Hidden Hope. I have included a link to Amazon's website in the chat as well. This is an awesome curation of Black suffering, but more importantly, it gives us insight into Dr. Harris's mind around Black suffering. And so thank you, Dr. Harris. Did I do well?
Thank you. Listen, Tonia, you're excellent. You were excellent then, you're excellent now. You're exaggerating. Why don't the young rapper give us a line, wrap us out? Is that possible, Sheila and Tonia?
Absolutely.
Sure, why not?
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Real quick,
Real
and
quick,
also
real quick.
Dr. Harris and Reverend Tonia and Sheila, I want to acknowledge that the state's attorney's office has a representative on with us from Prince George's County. So I do want to note that Sean Michael Wilson, who was on, is a representative of the state's attorney's office, Aisha Braveboy. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Sean, for joining us.
Yeah, and
Sean?
as long as we don't get prosecuted tonight. That's all good.
We're gonna ask Sia to slide a piece of legislation this way from down there in the Tidewater area just to cover us.
That's right. Absolutely. Okay, Jay-Z.
He called me Jay-Z.
Don't do that. 3J.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, that's fine. That's a compliment. Saying Jay-Z is one of the best out here. So that's a compliment for me.
Yes, sir.
Stated in Revelation, the operation, sweep out the whole nation with no hesitation. Trials and tribulation, hate and temptation, wipe out the lamentation, tear down the walls of Satan. This is a demonstration. I think it's amazing how this world is transformed to its new creation. And the transformation is its dedication. We're the motivation. Let's have a celebration. Praising his salvation. This your invitation. Increase the population with a new generation. God mixed with 3J's a mean combination. This is a presentation of his reincarnation. Everybody give praise. There's ovation. Want the truth? Here is the validation. Immortal ready for comebacks, annihilating, spitting nothing but brown sugar, annihilating. The hypocrites I know I'ma start facing. Listen to the trouble before you come to me basing. Thank you.
Wow. Excellent. 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 That's the power of Black rap. Thank you so much. Thank you. We're very grateful and very appreciative. Sheila, you and Tonia, y'all decide which one of y'all want to close us out and how.
Reverend Tonia.
Yes, Sheila and Tonia.
All hearts and minds clear. Lord, we come before you now. First, God, just giving you thanks for today, God. We thank you for a day not promised, but purpose. We thank you for all of the individuals and the souls that are here even now, oh God. And thank you for orchestrating such a discussion about how we can see your people from a human standpoint and connect with all. We thank you. We ask that you continue to cover us, keep us, protect us, and guide us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Sheila, now are we on break next week or what?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
We're on break.
Okay, so next week, the next 2 weeks, we have no discussion.
That's correct. That's correct. And Pastor Ray, we'll try to get you a link to this recording since we weren't able to go Facebook Live. Pastor Ray also put a link to The Well, which is his every Thursday evening session. And I would encourage you all, copy that link and check him out because what he and Brennan and 3J and Anna and Matt, what they do is powerful, and I enjoy being in the presence of what they're doing. Thank you, Dr. Harris, for giving us all this opportunity.
Yes.
Thank you, and thank all the participants. God bless all of you. Thanks again.
God bless you all. Be safe.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Hey, Sheila, do you have an email address or so I can send you the link or Tonia?
Yes, actually, let me give you, you can email me at Reverend T. Chantel. I'm putting it in the chat as well. RevChantel@gmail.com. I don't know Sheila's email address by memory.
Okay, I guess I can get it.
But I'll make sure she gets it. I'll make sure I forward it to her.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Donna. I really appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome. I'm glad I was able to do this.
Yeah, unfortunately, we couldn't go live and we were trying to work out the technical kinks ahead of time, but